Hello, and welcome to Building Smarter Knowledge Graph Pipeline for Secure and Robust Microelectronics Devices, presented by Dr. Peter Levin and Seema Naswa. Over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Damien. Thank you all for attending. We want to talk to you today about a novel approach to cybersecurity on microelectronic devices. And we thought we would start by setting up the problem for you in a way that you might not have heard before. First, microelectronic security, just so you know, is probably the last bastion of cybersecurity in our sector, right? I'm thinking software security, application security is something that we've been thinking about for a long time and many years. I'm thinking network security is probably where we started noticing anomalous and intrusive behavior. Cybersecurity on microelectronics devices is a really pernicious problem. It's a really difficult problem, in part because if you have a vulnerability, if you have a problem in outer space on a chip, or if you have a problem in a submarine or on a submersible cable on a chip, it's very, very difficult to do a hardware patch or upgrade. You may not even know that you have that vulnerability until the exploit is activated. What we're going to talk about today is a new kind of identification of potential problems that you can discover in the future. Probably all of us have used at one point or another the virus protection or other kinds of software applications that are typically retrospective. I've got to tell you that I've discovered a virus, and you've got to look on your computer if you have that virus, and then you'll be able to determine whether you need some kind of remedial approach. All of these are forensic approaches. What we're going to show you today are prospective approaches. We're going to show you a way of actually predicting where you're going to have a problem, and guess what? We're going to use an influence graph to find it. The last thing I want to say in context and in introduction is that almost all of the ways that we detect anomalies, almost all of the ways that we detect intrusions, so one of them might be accidental, the other one's on purpose, somebody's trying to hurt you, are based on something called a formal method, right? In our context, formal methods are really just a list of assertions. Thou shalt and thou shalt not. And what we're doing is something completely different. We're going to use an influence graph. It's an empirical method for sure, but we'll try to convince you that it's a good way to expose and determine the vulnerabilities on microelectronics devices. So the summary of the summary is we're at the last bastion of cybersecurity. It's the hardest one of all, and you know how well and not well we're doing on the other ones. And this is a predictive approach as opposed to a forensic approach, and we're using influence graphs as opposed to formal methods. And with that, Seema, would you please bring us to the next slide? Good. So the cyber attacks, I don't think I need to convince you. If you're anywhere proximate to this discussion, you know that they're really difficult. They're extraordinarily creative. And the real problem is that our adversaries, our opponents, they have to find one way in and exploit that. And we have to not only remember all of the other things that we have found, if you like, since 1996, all of the other vulnerabilities and exposures that have been discovered, and by the way, they haven't all been discovered, and yet we still know that we will never be able to see everything. There will always be an undiscovered vector. Now, that may sound like a menacing statement of the state of our community. I would like you to know that it is menacing and it is distressing, but it's also mathematically true that you can never actually have a complete set of axioms. You'll never be able to see everything that could possibly go wrong. And we're going to try to expand the visibility of the threat surface. We're not even claiming here that we're going to be able to use Neo4j to discover everything that could possibly go wrong. What we are saying is that you're going to see more. And that's the whole purpose of our exercise this afternoon. Seema, next slide. Chips are everywhere. When I started, that wasn't a true statement. That's a long time ago. But today, and we are particularly focused, we at AMITA are particularly focused on defense and national security cyber infrastructure. But our adversaries, our opponents, the people who don't wish us well, they can attack us almost anywhere. They can turn off and turn on electric power plants, turbines. They can take over cars. They can misdirect emergency vehicles. There's a lot of nasty and bad things that our adversaries have in store for us. There are literally hundreds of breaches in our healthcare infrastructure. And we list that for two reasons. In part because our company actually started as a healthcare data management company. That blue dot in the AMITA, in the A, is a program that we've been working on now for many years. If you're a veteran, or if you know a veteran, you might have heard of something called the blue button. The blue button is a certain kind of personal health record. And even if you don't know what blue button is, I bet at some point in your life you've gotten a medicine or maybe taken a shot, an immunization. You might have perhaps hurt yourself and ended up in an emergency room. You might have a chronic disease that requires a lot of care and attention. What do we all want about these kinds of healthcare interactions, these episodes of care? We only want our family to know about it. We don't want anybody else looking at that. That's very, very dangerous, very volatile information. So, and of course, the healthcare infrastructure is increasingly dependent on the microelectronic infrastructure. Yet another reason that we need to make sure that our chips are safe and secure. Seema, next slide. This is the obligatory, the problem is bad and it's getting worse slide. So I won't spend too much time here. In case you don't know, and honestly, I've been in cybersecurity for many years, and even I only learned recently about the NIST website that really tries to catalog and classify all the various kinds of exploits, intrusions, Trojans, booby traps, all the things that could happen. Remember the first thing that I said, if you have a software application and I found an exploit, you can send out a patch if you know about it. If you have a network application and you're seeing anomalous behavior, well, jeepers, you can see all the packets going in and out, and there's all kinds of clever and sophisticated ways to detect things that you may not want and may be contaminating what's on your wire. If you have a compromise, if you have a vulnerability, if you have an issue with your hardware, that's going to be a really tough, expensive, and potentially lethal problem. And that's a problem that's getting worse. NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology in the United States, they keep track of these things in a very clever, very comprehensive way. Problem is bad, and it's only getting worse. Seema, next slide. Thank you. Good. So what do we look at? And by the way, I would like you to believe, even if you're not that close to cybersecurity or microelectronic devices, I'd like you to believe that this is a pretty comprehensive coverage. So there are things that will turn off your device exactly when you don't want it. There are things that will pretend that your device is becoming obsolete, accelerated aging, in a way that will force you to replace it sooner than you thought, even though it's perfectly fine. You can take secrets out of your device. You can insert instructions into your device. There's all kinds of horrible and bad things. And especially, again, in our world, in Seema's and my world, where we're really focused on some very critical behaviors in the national security infrastructure, we really care about making sure that that those chips are secure. Next slide, please. Good. So I'm going to end my introduction kind of where I started. The way that people do this today is a very manual, error-prone, formal-based. Formal's great. We're by no means telling you that you shouldn't use formal methods, but what we are telling you is that formal methods are inadequate, necessary but not sufficient in order to expose the kinds of problems that we're looking for on the microelectronic platform. Seema, I believe I have completed our introduction. Do you want to take it from here?
Sure, Peter. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the insightful overview of the problem. So let's now look at Amida's solution for microelectronic security. And before that, I'm Seema Naswa, and I'm leading Microelectronic Security Initiative at Amida. Now, before we delve deeper into the solution space, let's just take a look at the typical progression in today's chip design process and understand the scale of the problem that we are dealing with. So typically, a chip design is started as an RTL code, few million lines of RTL code. You can compare it to any large software system. At first glance, it seems like, okay, few million lines of code, any good engineering team can easily handle it. But there is a twist here. RTL code is not just software that you execute. It describes the hardware behavior. So it's compiled or synthesized into tens of billions of logic gates, which are further mapped into hundreds of billions of transistors that comprise the chip, which will go and sit in your phone or other appliances practically everywhere here, like Peter was telling. So now, for this process, to execute this process, we need highly specialized tools and expertise. And there is a complex global supply chain which spans multiple countries. And through that supply chain, finally, we end up with the chips that we have in our appliances, right? So the vulnerabilities can hide anywhere in this enormous design, hundreds of billions of transistors. Vulnerabilities could be anywhere. Trojans could be introduced at any step of this supply chain. It makes sense to uncover these vulnerabilities at RTL level. As Peter was mentioning, traditional rule-based verification that neither provides 100% coverage nor it's effective in uncovering the previously unknown attacks. So here at Amida, what we have done is we are modeling the design as an interconnected graph so that we can apply graph algorithms and graph learning techniques to this design and uncover patterns, anomalies, and hidden weak links that will otherwise remain invisible. So let's go ahead and see how we do that. Now, a quick look at the objective and few key questions we need to answer to determine these vulnerabilities. So our objective here is simple but ambitious. We want to discover design vulnerabilities in quantitative, systematic manner rather than through known rule-based designs, rule-based analysis. Now, to do that, we need to answer a series of questions here. Questions like which signals can be manipulated to desynchronize the design, which signals value can be substituted, which signal can easily become hotspot. So all these different questions that we need to answer about the vulnerability of a design, they touch on different aspects of design integrity, all the way from control, data, synchronization, etc. Now, one thing is common between all these questions, though. They all revolve around signals. How signals are generated, how signals are propagated, how signals are related to each other across hierarchies, so all about signals. So this gives us now some insight. Since vulnerabilities are rooted in the relationships between signals, we need a representation that captures those relationships clearly. A structure that can encode connections, dependencies, transformations at the scale that's required for chip design. And that's where Amida's unique approach begins, using the graph as the foundation for systematic vulnerability discovery. Now, first, let's take a look at the basic elements of hardware design at RTL level. RTL level typically has, say, some stateful elements shown here as the orange blocks, and these are the elements which can store, which can remember their state, and these are like scattered all over the design and connected by dense clouds of logic, which is like combinational elements which cannot remember their state. Now, with these two groups of elements and connected by the signals, this is your typical RTL design. But even for a small hierarchy of this design, the connections can become complex and non-intuitive. It becomes very hard to trace the signals or analyze their vulnerabilities. So what we do here is we transform this design into a knowledge graph. Okay, so Amida's knowledge graph, we represent nodes. The nodes represent these stateful elements that I showed here, the orange ones. They also represent the signals, the wires that are there in the design, and the constants. And these nodes have the signal attributes like confidential, integrous, the dimensions of the signal, the parent handle of the signal. All of these attributes are stored on the nodes. And edges, they represent the transformations that happen between these signals. So there are multiple types of edges, like the purple one here. It's showing you assignment or data transformation. The cyan color one, this one is showing you the control transformation. Green one represents synchronization. And edges also, they have their own attributes, which could, for example, the type of reset signal, is it synchronous, asynchronous, how many bits were actually used in the transformation. So this knowledge graph represents signals, their relationships, and their specific attributes. Now, what are the key advantages of this knowledge graph? First of all, we can navigate the path across these billions of gates that we have in the design. Like in the previous slide, I showed you how our design goes from few million RTL lines to billions of gates. By representing it as a knowledge graph of signals, we can focus only on signals, and we can cross over the billions of gates that come in the middle and just focus on what matters to us. We can apply graph algorithms like anomaly detection, path analysis. We can uncover hidden interactions between these signals and find the potential vulnerabilities. Now let's see how this works in practice using an example RTL design. Now here on screen, I have a MIPS 16. It's a very small code just for presentation purpose. So the RTL, which is like, you can compare it to any software program, right? And it's organized into hierarchies. Hierarchies I've highlighted here in these rectangles. Hierarchies are like functions in a software program. So RTL consists of several hierarchies, and within a hierarchy, you may have more sub-hierarchies. Like if I click here, I get definition of this red hierarchy, and this further instantiates more child hierarchies. And along with the hierarchies, sub-hierarchies, a hierarchy can contain those same elements that I described earlier, the registers, the signals, the stateful and stateless elements. So there could be hundreds of hierarchies in a design. Okay, it can be nested. It can have a very deep nested hierarchy. So here I have, say I'm at the bottommost hierarchy of my design, and it's describing some logic here. Now, vulnerabilities can emerge at any level. They can emerge at the deepest level of hierarchy, and it can still affect by propagating to higher levels. So if we take this hierarchy, we extract its knowledge graph. How do we do that? We parse the RTL, and we identify the different elements of the design, the registers, the signals, the hierarchies, and then we create the nodes. Like here you can see this design has several signals, A, B, C, M, D, R, and all of these are represented here by the green nodes. So after representing the nodes, the signals as nodes and saving their attributes, we connect them through these edges. Now, edges, as I said earlier, they are signal transformations. Just by looking at this graph, you can see that, okay, my node A influences directly my node R. So this is something which came directly from the RTL here. As you can see, R is equal to A plus B. So both A and B impact R. So this is the relationship that we are representing in our knowledge graph, and of course with a lot of other attributes that we glean from the RTL. Now, once we have built the graph for specific hierarchy, we go ahead and we build graph for its parent hierarchy, and then we connect all the subgraphs to construct a comprehensive design level knowledge graph. So like here in this picture, you can see the sub hierarchy is now encapsulated, and it's also connected with its parent hierarchy. And by doing this, now within the sub-hierarchy, we are preserving the local interactions of the signal, and we can also see the global interactions across the hierarchies. Now, this allows us to now systematically ask few questions. We can ask like, okay, which signals influence the critical path of this design? Which data path crosses privilege boundary? Which signals can be exploited, like which one is closer to the output and which can be exploited. So in short, hierarchical knowledge graph construction has turned my unstructured RTL into an analyzable network. It gives me foundation to quantify and prioritize vulnerabilities. And how do we do that? So using the graph and the metrics, we can calculate rich metrics. So some metrics we derive directly from the RTL, some metrics then we compute on top of that, and we can capture the structure and behavior of the design. So metrics like connectivity metrics, it tells me how many other nodes a signal interacts with, which tells us how influential or critical a signal is, or a distance metrics like how far a signal is from the key privilege point, helping us understand how easily it can its effect can propagate. Signal role metric, whether it's a control signal or data signal, and which highlights the type of impact that that somebody can misuse. Now, combining these metrics, we identify areas where vulnerabilities exist in the design. For example, nodes with high influence or strategic connectivity help me determine where an attack could occur. If something is of high influence, chances are that's where the attack will occur. Combining role metrics with other metrics like distance metrics, we can tell the type of intrusion that would occur, whether it would be a data leakage or whether it would be a control hijacking. Some nodes are only active under certain conditions. Some are continuously accessible. So by looking at the activity of the nodes, we can determine the exposure during normal operation. That can it really be exploited during normal operation, or it's not much active, so it will not even be exploited, or there is no point for anybody to exploit it. Now, this slide ties together everything that I've shown so far. It shows you the power of the knowledge graph in practice. So we start with the RTL design. We transform the design into knowledge graph, a structured network of signals, registers, and hierarchies connected by their data and control transformations. It enables multiple complementary applications. I've already talked about revealing hidden vulnerabilities, how graph exposes subtle dependencies and critical paths. Vulnerabilities become visible because the graph encodes true connectivity and influence of signals across the design. So using the metrics that I talked about, we can quantitatively rank order the vulnerabilities. So that's one application of the knowledge graph. It also enables GenAI-based instrumentation. So knowing the rank order of the vulnerabilities, one can prioritize mitigation. Using generative AI, Amira automatically suggests or implement design instrumentations, design augmentation, so that we can manage under the potential attack. We can manage the response under the potential attack. For example, one can insert a monitor to alert or actively respond when the design is under attack. This graph also enables ML-based Trojan detection, leveraging the instruments output. So we have inserted instruments for mitigation. Leveraging that output, we can even train the ML models, and we can create models that will identify the Trojan and help you create a response for it. All right, so here we are presenting the case study that we did using our technology. Ibex processor is an open source processor, and it's a RISC-V based core, heavily used in embedded and security conscious applications. It's compact, energy efficient, pipeline structure makes it really good for energy efficient applications. We analyzed its RTL and using Amida's microelectronic security platform and identified several key exploit locations in this design. We identified signals that could be exploited to cause desynchronization attack or to cause spoof faults or to result in erratic instruction sequencing, resulting in unpredictable runtime behavior. So this case study demonstrates that our approach, Amida's approach, is practical and effective even on complex real-world processor. Now, to summarize all, modern hardware designs, they're astronomically complex, from millions of RTL lines to hundreds of billions of transistors. Traditional verification alone cannot uncover all potential vulnerabilities. And by transforming RTL to knowledge graph, we gain a structured, analyzable view of the signals and their transformations. So this enables multiple applications to strengthen the design against potential attacks, and it enables us to move beyond the traditional verification to actionable, data-driven security insight. Thank you.